blueberries. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Solar System, where we understand the system your solar goes into. Welcome back to Moon Days with Michael. I'm your host, Triangle Michael, and I am cutting out the esoteric middleman and giving you the tools you need to connect yourself right to the source. Welcome back to the masterclass known as the Orion constellation, where we're breaking down every single star inside of the Orion constellation. Now, I am going to contradict myself today because we are not talking about a star, rather we are talking about a nebula. And with that being said, we're talking about Ensis, the sword sheath of the Orion constellation, which actually isn't a star, it's a nebula. So, you're welcome. You get two cool things today. So you guys already know the drill with this series, so I'm not going to waste any more time. We're just going to hop into it. I'm just kidding, because if you're new, you don't. So we're going to be talking about this stars, or nebulas, physical placement, its orb, its influences, its natures, its fortune, and giving you the overall tools to understand what it means to have this in your chart. So without any further ado, Ensis, the nebula of the Orion constellation, the Orion Nebula, can be found in about 23 degrees of Gemini with an orb of 120. So Ensis has a nature of Mars and the Moon. So with that being said, it is very reflective but very focused on its motivations. So we're going to break that down once we actually start talking about its influence, which we're going to talk about right now. So there's a few things you need to note with this being the sword sheath of the Orion constellation, as well as it being a nebula and not a star. Let's break down the nebula part, because it's kind of cool. Nebulas are kind of weird dimensionally. They don't really fit into any dimensional vessel, which series over there. So, with that being said, with it being a nebula, this is the creator of the Orion constellations, the Royal Triangle Michael's way to kind of not only travel into the Orion constellation and view what's going on in the ecliptic, but basically it's a way out. So that being said, the reason why a nebula is so light in density is because you're only leaving a small part of yourself here to go and come back to later if you want. Now, with the nebula being also the sword sheath of the Orion constellation, you have to remember something. Why is the nebula, the travel point of the Orion constellation for Archangel Michael, a sword? Well, think about it. What's his main mission? The war on Lucifer. So it's not even a question of why the travel point in the Orion constellation would be known as the sword sheath. If it's always fighting, then it's always going to be traveling around its own mission, its own idea, its own war that it started, which is why the sword sheath of the Orion constellation is the nebula. Now, to elaborate on the nebula part, you're going to have to wait until I make a video about it. It's going to end up in that playlist over there. With that being said, let's actually talk about its influence. So Ensis' influence is very, as you might have guessed by it being the sword sheath, very combative and very focused, but at the same time can be very misfortunate because it's always dealing with fights and combating whatever it sees that it is going against. Then this can kind of leave it into being a constant state of combat as well as turmoil. So you're not really ever being able to relax. And this also transfers not only to physical combat, like being in a war and fighting against certain ideas that you go against, but also with the tongue and being very communicative.
Blah, 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 blah. That's all he does, just talks.
With that being said, you have to understand that the way that this goes about it is very focused and very precise, which is the whole reason the moon is a part of the influence here. So it has the nature of the Mars and the moon. So when you put those together, what do you get? You get a very hyper-focused, very reflective and reactive viewpoint. I just saw a bird dive. Dive, not dive. Dive. That's pretty cool. So when you put the nature of the Mars and the moon together, when you're talking about Ensis, the sword sheath of the Orion constellation, what exactly are you going to end up with? You're going to get a very hyper-fixated, very focused, very motivated, combative outcome. Now, with this being the case, this combat is very focused on what it wants and also what motivates it. So you're not really going to be able to change its mind. But because of the moon, it kind of dials back the aggression. If you want to think about the aggression when you're talking about Ensis, you can think of Aries, but not quite. If Aries is like a bonfire or a wildfire, then Ensis's aggression is like a laser-focused flamethrower. It's destructive. It might not be as destructive, but it's hyper-focused, and you do not want to be on the receiving side of this. Now, this can lead to a lot of misfortune. If you're always fighting, always being... Me too, bird. If you're always being very combative, you're never really going to get a time to relax, unless you feel like a time where you can actually put down the sword, relax, and focus on whatever you want. Because at some point in time, you got to live for yourself and not really fighting for some other idea that might not even be yours, which is part of the misfortune. A lot of people get stuck into the idea of fighting for something that isn't really their own idea. It's not really for them. But because of the conditioning, especially living in a third dimension, the influence of fighting and being very combative may lead you into doing things that aren't necessarily for yourself, which is where the misfortune comes into play. You know, it may or may not also lead to violent deaths if you're not careful, but you cross that bridge when you get to it, you know? However, with that being said, if you are actually aware of this energy and actually understand what you're fighting for, why you're fighting for it, and who you're fighting for, then this is different because now you're aware of all the situations you're getting into because of this energy, and you can make this play out more for yourself. Remember, influences don't mean shit if you don't use it. So if you're going to use it for yourself. Otherwise, it doesn't really make any sense now, does it? But until next time, let's give you the recap and let's move on. So, Ensis can be found in 23 degrees of Gemini and has an orb of 120. It has the nature of Mars and the Moon. Now, its fortune is more on the unfavorable side, but this is mostly just due to the fact that you're always fighting, you're constantly always on the move, and always kind of thinking about your next move. But the more important thing is actually understanding what you're fighting for and why you're fighting for it. And is it even really for you? So if you understand that, then the fortune will come to you. But anyway, that's pretty much it for the sword sheath of the Orion constellation, Ensis, the nebula, the travel point, the main overarching point of the Orion constellation, war, which is basically, every star. Anyway, so with that being said, we still have like 5 more of these stars to do. So I don't actually even know which one I'm going to do next. I'm going to throw them in a hat and pick one out later. So that's the one we're going to be talking about next. Can't say it because I don't know what it is yet. But I feel like it's going to start with a T. With that being said, you guys know the drill. Like, comment, subscribe. Let us know what you guys want us to hear. And if you guys want us to break down any other constellation, let us know. We're open to it. We're breaking down everything for you. So if you let us know what you want, maybe we'll do it a little faster. Who knows? Make sure you guys follow the Instagram, solar systems, and check out the reels. Basically, the daily alignments giving you an everyday understanding of every day's energy every day on the daily, breaking down the energy of that day so you know how to use it. But also, just so you're aware of it, and you can ride that wave and have a very pleasurable experience. If you guys want to request a reading, email us, readings@solarsystems.org. But until next time, bye y'all.